High above the city skyline, Evelyn Vance sat at the head of a mahogany table. Valued at $4.5 billion, her life was an empty fortress. Surrounding her, executives argued relentlessly over profit margins. She watched them, feeling entirely disconnected from the immense wealth that defined her existence. Every connection in her world felt transactional. The suffocating pressure of her corporate empire demanded an escape route, a secret ritual she guarded fiercely. Later that evening, she shed her custom white suit. She removed her diamond watch, replacing it with a simple, yet impossibly expensive cashmere sweater. Bypassing her security detail, Evelyn slipped into the rainy night. She drove an old, rusted Ford sedan, leaving the glittering high-rises far behind. Her destination was a rundown, neon-lit diner on the edge of the city. Here, amidst the worn vinyl booths, she was completely invisible. She sat alone, savoring a cup of bitter, burnt coffee. The absolute anonymity was the only thing that brought a genuine sense of peace to her mind. A few feet away, chaos was brewing. Garrett Miller, an exhausted mechanic running on sheer willpower, was trying to manage his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Suddenly, a heavy glass of thick chocolate milk slipped from Lily's hands. It crashed onto the table, sending a dark, sticky wave directly toward Evelyn. The brown liquid splashed across Evelyn's pristine sweater. Garrett vaulted up in sheer panic, his calloused hands freezing in horror as their eyes finally met. He stumbled through a panicked apology, offering to pay for the dry cleaning of a garment that cost more than his monthly rent. In her corporate world, a mistake like this would mean fired assistants and legal threats. But looking at his exhausted, striking face, she felt only warmth. She smiled gently, claiming she bought the sweater at a thrift store. With practiced ease, she introduced herself as a freelance interior designer. Insisting on making amends, Garrett bought her a slice of diner pie. They talked for hours, the wealthy executive captivated by the humble mechanic. Later, walking her to her rusted car in the rain, Garrett listened to the sputtering engine and offered to fix it for free. Driving back to her luxury penthouse that night, Evelyn wore a genuine, unstoppable smile. The intoxicating illusion had fully taken hold. Over the next few weeks, the diner meetings became deliberate. Evelyn shifted multi-million-dollar meetings just to sit across from him by 6 o'clock. Their dates were simple and quiet. They spent evenings sitting in the bed of his old pickup truck, watching the city lights from afar. She played her part flawlessly, splitting the cost of cheap pizza with crumpled dollar bills, complaining about imaginary demanding clients. Surrounded by the humble reality of his world, the powerful billionaire found herself falling deeply and completely in love with a man she was deceiving. To maintain her cover, Evelyn leased a cramped, unrenovated studio apartment in a modest neighborhood, creating a tangible anchor for her fictional life. She filled the small space with cheap, mass-produced furniture and second-hand books, meticulously crafting the identity of a struggling freelance designer. Her existence split into two jarring realities. By morning, she sat in corporate towers, authorizing 9-figure international wire transfers. By evening, she sat on a worn futon in the small studio, patiently helping young Lily with her first-grade mathematics homework. They shared simple meals of inexpensive, generic brand pasta, the warmth of the small room briefly masking the massive deception. Yet, the growing emotional attachment brought a crushing weight of guilt. Every look of absolute trust from Garrett felt like an accusation. Unaware of her wealth, Garrett worked exhausting overtime shifts at the greasy auto shop, determined to provide a special surprise. His rough, oil-stained hands carefully counted a small stack of hard-earned bills, storing them away in a hidden drawer. Evelyn watched him grow paler from the relentless physical labor, trapped by her own fear of revealing the truth. On the eve of her 33rd birthday, Garrett invited her to a modest neighborhood diner, holding a small velvet box in his pocket. With nervous reverence, Garrett placed the small velvet box on the checkered tablecloth, his gray eyes searching her face. Evelyn opened it to reveal a delicate, inexpensive silver chain adorned with a small crescent moon pendant. He explained softly that she had been a guiding light in the dark for him and Lily since the night they met.
It just feels so perfect.
Evelyn fought back tears, cradling the $40 necklace, knowing her biometric safe held treasures worth millions. As he clasped the silver chain around her neck, she mentally swore that she would confess the entire truth tomorrow. The following morning, corporate reality violently intervened at the Vance Global Tower on the highest floor. Richard Sterling, the ruthless chief operating officer, sat in his sleek office, analyzing anomalies in Evelyn's recent schedule. Driven by a desire for leverage over an upcoming corporate merger, Richard grew deeply suspicious of her frequent unescorted absences. He discreetly hired a high-end private investigator to shadow her old vehicle through the city streets. Within days, the investigator captured high-resolution photographs of the billionaire CEO eating cheap meals with a local mechanic. While Richard plotted his corporate blackmail, Garrett's fragile world suddenly collapsed entirely. Young Lily's condition flared into a severe respiratory infection, landing her in a sterile hospital bed for days. The mounting medical bills, combined with the shifts he had to miss at the auto shop, pushed him over the financial edge. Evelyn arrived at his cramped apartment to find him staring blankly at a pile of past due notices and an eviction warning. With trembling hands, Garrett confessed he had to sell his mechanic tools, the very things keeping him employed, to pay the hospital. Evelyn's heart shattered. She had billions sitting idle, generating more interest in a single day than he would make in a decade. She could write a check and solve every problem in his life in 30 seconds, but doing so would instantly destroy her illusion. Terrified his pride would make him walk away, she chose the cowardly route of covert intervention. From the secure confines of her executive office, she made a highly discreet phone call to her private wealth manager. 48 hours later, a mysterious community relief grant cleared Garrett's medical debt entirely, leaving him weeping with pure relief. The following Monday, Evelyn stepped into her executive boardroom, sensing an immediate, suffocating shift in the atmosphere. Richard Sterling sat arrogantly in her chair, a thick, ominous manila folder resting on the polished mahogany table. With a predatory smile, he tossed the folder forward, spilling high-resolution photos of Evelyn and the humble mechanic. Among the images lay a printed wire transfer, linking her corporate holding company directly to Garrett's anonymous medical grant. Richard smoothly demanded complete operational control of an upcoming merger, threatening to hand-deliver the file to Garrett if she refused. He assumed she would sacrifice her corporate ethics to protect her romantic illusion, gravely underestimating her immense resolve. Evelyn's initial panic rapidly crystallized into blinding, cold fury. She was not a woman who surrendered to leverage. Gathering the scattered photographs, she calmly stated that she genuinely loved the mechanic and would not be manipulated. With icy authority, she declared the merger dead and immediately terminated Richard's tenure at Vance Global, sealing his fate. Without waiting for his shocked response, Evelyn stormed out of the tower, sprinting toward her car as heavy rain began to fall. Evelyn's luxury car tore through the rainy city streets, desperate to reach the auto shop before Richard's vengeance took hold. She stepped out into the torrential downpour, her expensive suit instantly soaked, and ran frantically past rows of dismantled engines. But she was entirely too late. Richard, the venomous tactician, had anticipated her defiance and dispatched a courier hours ago. Garrett stood completely still by the hydraulic lifts, his oil-stained hands gripping the documents spread across a metal workbench. He stared at a prominent financial magazine clipping featuring Evelyn's face, detailing her massive $4 billion net worth. Beside it sat the charity wire transfer receipt, explicitly linking the miraculous medical grant to Evelyn's corporate empire. Hearing her approach, he slowly turned his head. The expression in his gray eyes wasn't just anger, it was profound, hollow devastation. Evelyn took a desperate step forward, weeping, trying to explain that the money meant nothing to her but his survival meant everything. But Garrett felt only humiliation. He realized every shared struggle, every crumpled dollar bill, had been a fabricated billionaire's game. Bitterly reminding her of his cheap birthday gift, he turned his back, demanding she return to her tower and leave him in the shadows. The next 3 months were a masterclass in professional brutality and profound personal agony for Evelyn. True to her word, she dragged Richard before the board of directors, systematically dismantling his corporate career. She exposed his blackmail attempt with forensic evidence, terminating his contract and blacklisting him across the industry. In the corporate world, she became a terrifying force of nature, operating with a cold efficiency that sent stock prices soaring. But inside her luxury penthouse, she was a ghost, staring blankly at the cheap silver crescent moon necklace. Abandoning her old disguises, she channeled her grief into radical transparency, refusing to hide behind shell corporations ever again. She established a massive, highly public foundation dedicated strictly to debt relief for working-class families and pediatric healthcare. Meanwhile, Garrett fought a bitter war against his own heart, trapped in a state of financial security built on deception. He tried to return the money, but the lawyers informed him the trust was irrevocable, legally binding the funds to his daughter's care. As weeks passed, watching her defend working-class mechanics on national television, he slowly realized her deception was born of profound loneliness. Then came the dangerous twist neither of them could have anticipated. Bitter, unemployed, and desperate for revenge, Richard leaked the entire story to a vicious tabloid syndicate. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Garrett was picking young Lily up from her elementary school when the ambush happened. 6 vans screeched to a halt outside the chain-link fence, and dozens of aggressive paparazzi swarmed the sidewalk. They shoved flashing cameras into Garrett's face, shouting vile, invasive questions about his relationship with the billionaire. Garrett panicked, scooping a terrified, crying Lily into his arms and trying desperately to push through the chaotic mob. Blinded by camera flashes, he realized with sudden clarity that this suffocating nightmare was the brutal reality of Evelyn's world. Suddenly, the deafening blare of heavy sirens pierced the air, startling the aggressive crowd. 3 massive, armored black SUVs jumped the curb, scattering the paparazzi like frightened insects. The doors flew open, and Evelyn's highly efficient security contractors immediately formed an impenetrable human wall around Garrett and his daughter. The lead security contractor calmly escorted Garrett and Lily into the reinforced vehicle, pulling them away from the flashing cameras. Instead of driving to his modest apartment, the armored convoy descended into the private, heavily guarded underground bunker of the Vance Global Tower. A secure biometric elevator carried them up to the highest floor, opening into the expansive, ultra-luxurious executive suite. Evelyn stood waiting, her flawless corporate facade entirely broken. Her hair was a mess, and her blue eyes were red from crying. Seeing that Lily was perfectly safe, she let out a broken sob of immense relief, dropping to her knees on the expensive carpet. Keeping her distance, she tearfully apologized for the chaotic ambush, offering to buy them a house anywhere in the world to fix her mistake. Garrett looked around the massive, opulent office, observing the bulletproof glass and the army of guards outside the heavy doors. Looking at the billionaire kneeling before him, he finally understood the deeply isolating, gilded cage she lived in every single day. He reached down with his calloused hands, gently pulling her to her feet, and pulled the cheap silver necklace from his jacket. Clasping it around her neck, he promised there would be no more lies, sealing a new beginning between the powerful CEO and the humble mechanic. Their reconciled relationship marked the beginning of a profound, transparent chapter, entirely devoid of secrets or cheap studio apartments. Garrett and Lily stepped into Evelyn's actual life, trading the grimy auto shop for the expansive, marble-floored luxury penthouse. The transition was jarring. Lily stared in absolute wonder at the indoor pool, while Garrett felt a heavy, lingering sense of displacement. Evelyn, however, was radiant, finally able to share her true self without the suffocating weight of a fabricated identity. To officially introduce him to her world, she invited Garrett to the annual Vance Foundation High Society Charity Gala. Stepping out of the Maybach, Garrett wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, yet he still felt like a grease-stained mechanic in a costume. The grand ballroom was filled with corporate elite, glittering with diamonds, champagne, and ruthless, unspoken judgment. Whispers trailed them as they walked. The recent tabloid scandal was still fresh in the minds of Chicago's wealthiest titans. Gregory Caldwell, the powerful and traditional chairman of the board, watched their arrival with cold, calculating disapproval. Despite Evelyn's reassuring grip on his arm, Garrett realized that surviving her world of immense wealth might be harder than escaping poverty. The gala was only the beginning of a grueling psychological war. The corporate elites viewed Garrett not as a romantic partner, but as a severe liability. The following morning, Gregory Caldwell summoned Evelyn to a private, emergency meeting with the board's senior members. Spreading recent financial charts across the table, Gregory coldly pointed out that her public relationship was destabilizing investor confidence. He argued that traditional shareholders wanted stability, not tabloid drama involving a working-class mechanic from the suburbs. Evelyn fought back fiercely, refusing to let outdated corporate snobbery dictate her personal life, but the pressure was immense. Unbeknownst to Evelyn, Garrett had arrived at the tower to surprise her for lunch, carrying a simple homemade sandwich. Standing outside the slightly ajar boardroom door, he overheard the harsh, calculated words of the chairman. Garrett listened as Gregory bluntly stated that staying with him would ultimately destroy the Vance legacy and her charitable foundation. The heavy realization struck Garrett like a physical blow. He wasn't just out of place, he was actively hurting the woman he loved. Quietly stepping back from the door, Garrett walked away, carrying a new, heartbreaking burden born entirely out of love and sacrifice. Returning to his quiet apartment, Garrett made the most agonizing decision of his life. He realized that true love wasn't just about standing by someone's side, sometimes, it meant stepping away to protect them. He packed a small duffel bag with his and Lily's belongings, leaving the expensive gifts Evelyn had bought them neatly on the bed. Sitting at his small kitchen table, Garrett took a pen and began to write a heartbreaking letter of resignation from their relationship. He wrote that he loved her too profoundly to be the anchor that dragged her magnificent empire into the depths. That evening, Evelyn returned to the penthouse, exhausted from fighting the board, expecting to find Garrett waiting for her. Instead, she found the penthouse completely empty, with only a folded piece of paper resting on the massive kitchen island. As her eyes scanned his handwriting, the crushing reality of his silent sacrifice brought her to tears. He asked her to keep building her charitable foundation, to change the world without the burden of his presence holding her back. But Garrett had entirely underestimated the ferocious loyalty of Evelyn Vance. She had no intention of letting the board win. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at the Vance Global Tower with an aura of terrifying, unyielding authority. She bypassed her executive office entirely, marching straight into the emergency boardroom where Gregory Caldwell was holding court. Throwing the heavy glass doors open, she silenced the room instantly, demanding the immediate attention of every senior shareholder. Evelyn slammed Garrett's crumpled letter onto the mahogany table, not as a sign of weakness, but as a declaration of war. She announced that if the board believed her personal life was a liability, they were completely misjudging her priorities. With icy precision, Evelyn delivered an absolute ultimatum: Gregory would step down, or she would immediately liquidate her entire majority stake. Liquidating $4 billion of stock overnight would instantly crash the company's valuation, destroying their collective wealth. Gregory's arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of profound, pale terror as he realized she was entirely serious. The remaining board members panicked, quickly turning against the chairman to protect their own financial survival. By noon, Gregory Caldwell was escorted out of the building, and Evelyn had solidified absolute control over her empire and her future. With the corporate war decisively won, Evelyn had secured her magnificent empire, but the victory felt entirely hollow without him. Leaving the tower, she drove herself directly to Garrett's modest apartment building, her heart pounding with anxious hope. But she was met with a devastating sight. The apartment was completely empty, the keys left resting on the kitchen counter. Garrett had vanished without a trace, leaving the city entirely to ensure his presence would never compromise her legacy. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn repurposed her immense corporate resources, turning her security network into a private search party. She spent her nights staring at a map on her glowing computer screen, desperately tracing every possible route he could have taken. The brilliant CEO who could predict international market trends was now entirely consumed by the search for a humble mechanic. Her perseverance finally paid off when her head of security intercepted a quiet property transfer record. It was a lease agreement for a rundown, independent auto repair garage located in a small, foggy coastal town miles away. Without a second thought, Evelyn abandoned her board meetings, determined to cross the distance and retrieve the missing piece of her soul. Trading her corporate jet for a rugged SUV, Evelyn embarked on a relentless drive up the winding, foggy coastline. She left the glittering skyline of Chicago far behind, plunging into the quiet isolation of the rural seaside. Hours later, she arrived in a small, weathered fishing town where the heavy ocean mist clung to the streets. Navigating through the quiet roads, she finally spotted the faded wooden sign of an independent auto repair garage. Pulling up to the gravel driveway, her heart hammered against her ribs as she parked the luxury vehicle. Stepping out of the car, her expensive designer heels crunched against the oil-stained dirt, a stark collision of two worlds once again. Through the open bay doors, she saw young Lily sitting happily on a tire, drawing quietly in a sketchbook. And there, sliding out from beneath a rusted pickup truck, was the man who had walked away from billions for her. Garrett wiped the dark engine grease from his forehead, looking exhausted but holding a quiet, undeniable sense of peace. He paused, his calloused hands freezing mid-air as he noticed the striking silhouette standing in the foggy entrance. The heavy metal wrench hit the concrete floor with a resounding echo, snapping the suffocating silence of the garage. Stepping forward from the foggy threshold, Evelyn revealed her tear-streaked face, abandoning every trace of her imposing corporate armor. Garrett slowly stood up, wiping his grease-stained hands on a rag, completely paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of her presence. With trembling vulnerability, she explained that she had violently overthrown her own board of directors to protect their future. She confessed that retaining control of her $4 billion empire meant absolutely nothing if she had to live in it without him. Garrett listened intently, the defensive walls around his wounded heart finally crumbling under the weight of her undeniable sincerity. He realized she hadn't come as a wealthy CEO demanding his return, but as an equal, pleading for a second chance at genuine love. Closing the distance between them, Garrett reached out, his rough mechanic's hands gently framing her flawless, tear-streaked face. Oblivious to the dark engine oil staining her immaculate designer coat, Evelyn threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. As they held each other tightly in the rustic garage, the vast, intimidating chasm between their two radically different worlds finally closed. Deciding to temporarily leave her corporate responsibilities behind, Evelyn chose to remain in the quiet coastal town with Garrett. The transition was surreal. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire found genuine joy in sweeping the garage floor. Garrett felt an initial reluctance, fearing her presence might disrupt the humble, hard-working life he had painstakingly built. However, seeing her learn to handle tools and communicate with local customers, his anxiety slowly dissolved into admiration. They built a new rhythm together, mornings spent in the garage and evenings watching the fog roll over the dark Atlantic. Evelyn, once accustomed to private jets and high-speed transit, now found peace in the slow, deliberate pace of the rural seaside. Lily thrived in this simple environment, spending her days playing near the shoreline as Garrett taught her basic mechanics. Garrett realized that while the immense wealth she possessed was a reality, their life here was defined by who they were, not what they owned. Financial security from her foundation ensured Lily's future, but it no longer dictated the terms of their daily happiness. The tranquility they had found in the fog-drenched coastal town was, unfortunately, destined to be short-lived. A relentless investigative journalist, formerly an associate of Richard, had been meticulously tracking Evelyn's digital footprint. On a Tuesday morning, a new, incendiary article appeared online, pinpointing the exact coordinates of their rural sanctuary. The effect was immediate. The small fishing town's quiet streets were suddenly flooded with unwanted visitors and media vans. Evelyn watched from her window as the peaceful atmosphere of their refuge evaporated under the invasive gaze of the world. Garrett saw the mounting chaos from the garage, realizing their anonymity had been cruelly stripped away once more. People crowded the sidewalks, cameras held high, desperately hoping for a glimpse of the billionaire and her mechanic. The locals, who had treated them as neighbors, now seemed wary of the circus that had descended upon their doorstep. Garrett felt a surge of familiar helplessness, terrified that the storm of publicity would poison this sanctuary like it had Chicago. But this time, Evelyn didn't run. She turned to Garrett, her expression hardening with the resolve to face the consequences together. Instead of retreating, Evelyn stood firmly, signaling her security detail to facilitate an open, controlled press conference. She insisted on holding the event right in front of the rustic auto garage, forcing the media to see their life in its raw, authentic state. Garrett stood beside her, his hand firmly holding hers, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of their unified front against the cameras. Evelyn addressed the swarming crowd with razor-sharp composure, stating that Garrett was her partner, not a spectacle. She firmly established legal boundaries, informing the media syndicate that any further harassment of their family would be met with severe litigation. The paparazzi, stunned by her newfound, unapologetic ferocity, slowly lowered their lenses as the weight of her authority took hold. Garrett spoke next, his voice steady and grounded, emphasizing that he was simply a man living a life he had earned, not one he was given. Their words were broadcast to millions, effectively transforming a potential scandal into a powerful narrative of choice and integrity. As the press reluctantly packed away their equipment, the chaotic storm of publicity began to subside into a respectful, albeit cautious, distance. For the first time, Evelyn and Garrett stood amidst the quiet coastal breeze, realizing that transparency was their ultimate protection. Life in the coastal town settled into a rhythm that no amount of corporate wealth could ever replicate. Evelyn began working closely with the town council, not as a titan of industry, but as a dedicated neighbor. She funneled foundation resources into restoring the local school and modernizing the town's outdated community clinic. Garrett watched with pride as the woman who once commanded global markets now painted the community center fence alongside locals. During quiet afternoons, he taught her the intricacies of engine repair, finding joy in her patient, inquisitive nature. Evelyn discovered a profound sense of satisfaction in fixing a machine, a stark contrast to the abstract numbers of her previous life. Lily became the bridge between them, thriving in a school where she was known as a classmate, not a billionaire's ward. The barrier of their past lives began to fade, replaced by a shared identity forged in the fog and hard work. Even the wary townspeople began to welcome them, seeing the sincerity in their daily actions. They were no longer the CEO and the mechanic, they were simply two people building a home upon a foundation of genuine respect. Word arrived that the Vance Foundation had been awarded the prestigious Global Philanthropy Prize for their radical community impact. Evelyn initially hesitated, deeply preferring the quiet anonymity of the coastal town over the fanfare of international acclaim. It was Garrett who gently pushed her, reminding her that her visibility could inspire other titans of industry to use their power for good. They traveled back to the city for the ceremony, but this time, they walked the carpet not as a scandal, but as a testament to purpose. In the grand hall, the corporate elite who once whispered in judgment now stood in respectful silence as Evelyn took the stage. Evelyn delivered a speech that stripped away corporate jargon, speaking instead about the profound lessons learned in a grease-stained garage. She publicly acknowledged Garrett, not as a peripheral detail, but as the partner whose integrity had redefined her entire worldview. The applause was thunderous, marking a shift in the corporate culture she had once dominated with cold detachment. Garrett watched from the wings, his eyes brimming with quiet pride for the woman he had helped bring back to the light. For Evelyn, this accolade wasn't a return to her old life, but a bridge connecting her two worlds into one sustainable future. Returning to the coastal town, the couple embraced a new life where corporate influence and simple labor coexisted in harmony. Evelyn seamlessly integrated her leadership role with her life in the seaside, managing her empire from a high-tech home office. Garrett's once humble garage evolved into a thriving training center, offering vocational opportunities to the town's youth. They spent their mornings together in the workshop, Evelyn analyzing market trends while Garrett mentored eager apprentices. Their life was no longer a secret or a spectacle, it was a testament to the fact that love could flourish across any divide. Lily, now entirely at home in the town, often joined them, learning the value of both curiosity and hard work. Standing on the beach, watching the waves, they realized that the billionaire and the mechanic had become something far more substantial. They were simply parents, neighbors, and partners, building a future where their past identities no longer held dominion. The golden sunset light reflected off the ocean, mirroring the calm, unwavering stability of their current life.